Good morning, everyone. We're ready to get started with our program this morning. Okay, welcome. I'm Ann Petros. I'm a member of the Young Lawyers Division and Vice Director of the Student Loan Advocacy and Financial Wellbeing team. And I'm very excited to be moderating today's panel, and I'm honored to be joined by two distinguished panelists. So Kate Campbell is a Senior Assistant Attorney General at the Consumer Protection Section at the Oregon Department of Justice here in Portland. At the Oregon DOJ, she investigates violations of Oregon's Unlawful Trade Practices Act, as well as assists with educating consumers, businesses, and policymakers on consumer protection matters. Kate has focused on student loan and educational issues that come within the section's work over the past 4 years. She earned her JD and MPH from the Northeastern University School of Law and Tufts University School of Medicine, and received her bachelor's from Lewis and Clark College. And Mike Pierce is Executive Director and co-founder of the Student Borrower Protection Center, a nonprofit organization fighting to protect people from predatory student lenders and end the student debt crisis. He also co-founded and co-directs the Student Loan Law Initiative at University of California Irvine School of Law, the nation's first academic center on student loan law. He is an attorney, advocate, and former senior regulator who joined SBPC after more than a decade fighting for student loan borrowers' rights on Capitol Hill and at the Federal Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, an agency I am quite familiar with. During his time on Capitol Hill, Mike served as a policy advisor to Congressman John Sarbanes, where he assisted in the passage of legislation creating the Public Service Loan Forgiveness Program. So we will start today with Kate first, and she'll guide us through how states are involved in student loan issues. And then Mike will take over and discuss everything that you need to know about the Public Service Loan Forgiveness Program, and then we'll open it up for questions. So without further ado, Kate, on to you.
Thank you, Ann. All right, everybody can hear me okay? Great. Good morning. We are the lucky recipients of the 8 a.m. Saturday morning slot. So if it were me, I'd probably be in the back with a cup of coffee. So if you need to go get a second cup of coffee, I'm not going to be offended while I'm talking. We're just happy you showed up. So thank you, step one. Again, I'm Kate Campbell. I work at the Oregon Department of Justice. I've been there for about 7 years, and in the past 4 years have focused on student loan issues that come up in our section in consumer law. I'm really happy to be here with my friend Mike, who's going to give you an excellent how-to presentation after I give you a brief overview of what states do to help student loan borrowers. So I hope that this info you can take back, you can share with people you know professionally and personally in your lives. And we're here for a little bit after the presentation as well if you want to come up and ask us questions that you don't want to ask in front of the group. So with that, my disclaimer, anything I say during this presentation is just a reflection of my own opinion and not necessarily that of the Oregon Attorney General, though you can check with her, or the Oregon Department of Justice. Okay, let's just dive right into the background. Why we're here, right? Interesting. Well, you can't see everything that's on that slide, but so the top bullet point, which you can't see, says that outstanding student loan debt in the United States has reached $1.62 trillion, owed by approximately 43 million borrowers as of June 30th of this year. Interestingly, this represents a $26 billion increase since last year, and no change in the number of student loan recipients. And so, I'm coming to this assuming you have a little bit of a background in student loan issues, frankly, probably because it's in the news or because someone in your life has student loans that you're familiar with. So I'm not going to go into some basic stuff, but, if you ever look confused, just do this and I'll pause and slow down for a minute. But So there's been this modest increase in direct loan balances. So direct loans are our federal student loans that borrowers have been borrowing since 2010, and then there's the FFEL loan for borrowers who went to school prior to that. And Mike is going to talk about why FFEL loans balances may have been declining more rapidly recently, in large part because of this temporary limited PSLF waiver. So as a result of these shifts, and this is all data that the U.S. Department of Education just released, Ed now directly manages 93% of the federal loan portfolio. So if you know anybody who's had a federal student loan in the past couple years, you're probably very well aware that there's been a payment suspension from the CARES Act and subsequent administrative actions since late March 2020. And because of this, there's about 25 million direct loan recipients who are in forbearance status, and 99% of those are because of the CARES Act. You also probably know that payment suspension has been extended several times, but it is set to end at the end of this year. And what we all don't know, and what Mike is concerned about, and what I'm concerned about, is how financially ready student loan borrowers are or are not to resume payments once they resume. And some borrowers likely are going to manage it just fine. But there are going to be many borrowers who are going to struggle. And the CFPB, the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, this year in April released a report indicating that there's going to be about 20 million borrowers who have at least one risk factor for being at risk financially when the payment suspension ends. And that may be due to pre-pandemic delinquencies or pre-pandemic payment assistance, having multiple student loan servicers, delinquencies on other credit products, or during the pandemic, a new third-party collection. That's a lot of borrowers that we're worried about. Interesting. Well, there it went. Okay. So in a poll in 2019 conducted for the Pew Charitable Trusts, 7 in 10 Americans said that taking out a student loan is a reasonable choice given the benefits of a college degree. But also in that poll, 89% of respondents said that they're worried about people's ability to repay these loans. And we know that student loan borrowers report difficulty accessing information about their loans and repayment status, and that they've been given unclear guidance or, frankly, wrong information about their repayment situation and options from their loan servicers. This can have significant consequences. Confusion and difficulty understanding repayment options can force borrowers to accrue additional interest, to pay unnecessary fees or penalties, and can slow repayment, which can lead to delinquency and default. So, given these borrower confusion and difficulties, states have been concerned about their citizen. They've been concerned about taxpayers, and they've been concerned about the economic limits of spending of people in their state, and have decided for various reasons to get involved in student loan issues, not counting on federal agencies to take enough action. And states have done this in a variety of ways, and I'm just going to give you a snapshot today of how states have been involved in student loan issues. So first, I want to talk about first how states have increased oversight of the issues. Since 2015, there has been over a dozen, I think probably over 15 now, states who have passed legislation to expand student loan oversight. And one way of doing that, states have imposed new regulatory guidelines. So these provisions commonly subject servicers to oversight from typically a state banking or finance authority. And in these laws, some states include specific provisions that require services to meet rules for how and when they communicate with borrowers or respond to borrower complaints. And many states also impose fees if the servicers don't meet these legal requirements. So by example, the Oregon legislature passed Senate Bill 485 in 2021, championed by our Attorney General, which requires all student loan servicers doing business in Oregon to obtain or renew a license. And this allows Oregon's Division of Financial Regulation to regulate student loan servicers in the same way that the division regulates other financial servicers. Another state example is anybody from Connecticut? Oh, no, Connecticut. Oh, there we go. Connecticut passed, I believe, the first law in 2015, which requires student loan servicers to be licensed with your state banking commissioner. And it has provision in its law that other state laws have included that interesting provisions such as prohibiting servicers from misleading borrowers. You wouldn't think you'd need to put that in the law, but there it is. Knowingly or recklessly misapplying loan payments, which has been an issue for borrowers, or knowingly or recklessly providing inaccurate information to a credit bureau, which we know happens, unfortunately, with some frequency. If I just keep typing, oh look, if I keep pressing, all of my bullets come up at once. States also have created student loan ombudsperson positions. And I think there's about the same number, maybe 15 or so ombudspersons in the United States now. And they have kind of common responsibilities, although everybody's position looks a little bit different. And that's basically reviewing borrower complaints and being a bit of a liaison between borrowers and servicers. They also compile student loan borrower and repayment data. You would think that would be easily accessible data. It hasn't been. Mike's group has done a great job compiling that data, and other federal agencies have, but if you want to get it for your state, that has been difficult to achieve in the past. And they also provide annual reports to the legislature. So when the legislature asks, well, how many student loan borrowers X, Y, or Z, states have had trouble reporting that because the data hasn't been easily accessible. So again, by example, Oregon Senate Bill 485 created this ombuds position, and it's housed within our Oregon Division of Financial Regulation. And they themselves identify as a liaison. They say, our job is to try to bring resolution of any conflict between a borrower and a servicer. So if you live in a state with an ombuds person and you know somebody who has an issue with the student loan product or service, you should inform your contact that they can contact their state ombudsperson. If your state doesn't have one, you can contact the CFPB. You can also contact Federal Student Aid. There are ombuds positions, and we know that those folks are very willing and able to assist borrowers. So in addition to these licensure efforts and the ombudsman oversights, some states have also done things such as required educational institutions to provide additional information and resources. Several states have creation of borrower information courses. Those of you may not have graduated decades ago. We didn't have any of that financial education when we were getting out, and I think this is a fantastic idea. Pennsylvania requires all higher ed institutions to provide information to students regarding their loan balance and repayment options each year, by example. But just another way that states have trying to figure out how they can help their citizens learn about student loan issues. Even another way is requirement for private loan servicers. States have applied additional oversight to private student loans, which despite, I've read different. It might comprise less than 15% of student loans or 10% of less student loans. It depends on where you're reading your information. Nonetheless, it's a significant percentage, and it's significant in terms of what rights you don't have in a form of student loan debt. In fact, the CFPB reported that the percentage of complaints regarding private student loans has increased from 28% in 2020 to 36% in 2021. So despite being that relatively small share of total student loans, they have an outsized share of complaints from student loan borrowers. And some states have expanded oversight provisions that apply specifically to these private loan borrowers to ensure that borrowers receive particular guidance. In Illinois, for example, private student loan servicers are required to provide info about alternative repayment options, not just a standard repayment option, among other things, which I think is great. So now turning to what I do with my colleagues, and so some states, not all, but a nice number of them have been passing legislation to expand oversight and creating these positions, but many state attorneys general have been very active on student loan issues throughout this entire past decade or so of student loan issues that have really blown up. And we do it in a variety of ways. Historically, we are where people go to get consumer education, where people file complaints if they don't have an ombudsperson, and what you probably all think of, we do enforcement. So I think you get CLE credit for this, so here's your CLE portion of the day. So it is important, is anybody familiar with consumer laws, UDAP laws? Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, good. That's better than the average room. I wanted to give you an important background. So in every single state, there are statutes that empower state agencies, including most state attorneys general, to prosecute unlawful business practices. And many of these state statutes parallel the Federal Trade Commission Act and use the language of the Federal Trade Commission Act. So sometimes you'll hear people refer to these laws as little FTC acts. They're generally referred to UDAP as to UDAP laws, which is for unfair or deceptive acts and practices. And so, but interestingly, in contrast to the FTC Act, which can only be enforced by the FTC, state UDAP laws give private right of action, often, to consumers in their state statutes. These laws are not uniform. It would be so much easier if they were sometimes in my world, but they're very widely in how they look from state to state. So some mirror the FTC Act and broadly prohibit unfair or deceptive acts and practices. Others, like Oregon's, are so-called laundry list laws, in which they specifically enumerate different prohibited practices. I think Oregon's is up to subsection quadruple little z, so if you time the alphabet by 4, that's our prohibited practices. I don't have it memorized. I look at my law every single time I'm looking at a matter. So you can see how states, when I talk about in a minute how we work together, how this can be a little bit cumbersome, and something to keep in mind. But despite this lack of uniformity, there are some common elements to state UDAP laws. For example, all of them address in some way the overall problem of deception and other potentially unfair practices in consumer transactions, including student loans, which includes student loans, I should say. And nearly all of them provide for enforcement by some agency of the state, usually the state attorney general. Most of them also provide for private right of action by consumers, again, not available under federal law. And finally, they all contain penalty provisions of some kind, although these range from injunctions to monetary penalties. So now the application of the UDAP law to what we do for student loans, right? So again, reviewing what attorney general offices do in this area and can do for consumer law, right? We have largely been the provider of consumer ed to our state consumers for decades. Now we have a lot of different agencies assisting us in that effort, and we have now in Oregon a student loan ombudsperson who's going to assist directly on student loan issues, but in a lot of states that's not the case. So if you want to reach your state constituents, your attorney general office is usually going to be the one that's going to get that information out there. Also, we do a lot of complaint handling. So if there is a complaint you want to make against a student lender or against your servicer or against a scammer who has offered you, quick loan forgiveness, you typically are going to be filing that with your state AG office. And thereby they then enter into this mediation program. So it's not usually typically mediated by an attorney, it's a staff member, and the consumer and the business talk to each other and attempt to reach some sort of resolution. That's a lot of what goes on in a state AG office, and it's really important. But also, and what you're probably most interested in, is enforcement actions. So we investigate matters, we settle matters, we litigate matters if necessary, including student loan related matters. And we utilize this in a variety of ways. So not every AG office is going to look the same. So I saw we have Northeastern folks there. Do we have Midwest people here? Okay. Oh, the lone Midwester. Oh, two. Okay. You're opposite ends. Do we have people from Southwest region, Mountain West? And then the rest of you are from the Pacific Northwest, generally? Okay. South? Oh, sorry. All right, so all of your state AG offices are not going to work in the same way necessarily as your neighbor state, for example. And so state AG offices achieve enforcement of their state UDAP laws in a number of ways. So some states send out formal notice cease and desist letters to companies that appear to be violating their state UDAP laws. Some states can enter into settlements without filing a complaint in court. That's typically called in state AG lingo assurances, so assurances of voluntary compliance or assurances of discontinuance. And then states also can enter into consent judgments that we resolve complaints that they've filed. And we do that with, a wide variety of consumer businesses, including those that lend student loans or service student loans or scam student loan products. And we achieve a wide variety of remedies. We achieve injunctive relief. We might require specific performance. There's monetary penalties, sometimes attorney's fees, and consumer restitution. An important thing to remember about consumer restitution that most people don't remember is that although the AG can seek it, the Attorney General does not represent and is not legal counsel for individual consumers. And I think that's a very important point for the general public to remember. It's hard for the general public to remember, in fact. So I like to always remind attorneys that so you can help mediate expectations sometimes. And another important way that AGs can serve student loan borrowers is through collaboration. And this is what I do a lot of in my role at the Oregon Department of Justice. I think it's really effective. Sure, there are headaches in working with different state agencies across the country, but I think we can really pack a punch that way. We can participate in working groups in which we can learn from one another what's going on around the country. We can participate in joint investigations. We can have wide-ranging settlement discussions if necessary, and we can litigate together or separately if necessary, but in tandem. So when AG offices work together in multi-state manners, resources can be shared, and oftentimes things can be more efficient in that way. And it's actually, I think, more important when you come at the end of it to who's getting relief, because I think a student loan borrower in Pennsylvania would feel not happy if a student loan borrower who's being serviced by a similar company in Washington, for example, got relief, but that borrower didn't. So in this way, we often can get relief nationally. We do this on student loan issues. We also write letters that are more policy-oriented. So we've sent letters to the White House. We've sent letters to the U.S. Department of Education. We've sent letters to congressional leaders advocating for whatever position the AGs are passionate about a particular student loan issue that's affecting their citizen. So this is, I feel like I've hopefully impressed upon you the wide range of work that we do for student loan borrowers. A big multi-state settlement that you probably heard about in the news was the Navient AG settlement that was announced early this year. If you want to learn more, the website is navientagsettlement.com. But that was an excellent example of a multi-state effort to address problems for student loan borrowers, and ended up getting restitution and debt forgiveness to borrowers as well. So I think we're saving our questions to the end, but I just wanted you look very awake, which is impressive for this hour. So, but if you have questions about what I've said, write them down so you don't forget. But I'm going to just pass it over to Mike, and I hope that you take away what he's going to share, because I think this is really a really important message Nick's going to give you.
Well, thank you.
Thank you, Kate, and just bear with us while we get the slides up.
Switch slides, and this is not going to freak out, and it's not going to be hard. I believe in this. We got it. We got it. We got it. All right. So I am mostly going to talk about public service loan forgiveness, but I think it's helpful. Oh yeah, I think it's helpful to get a feel for who's here and what you want to learn about. Who are practicing public interest lawyers? Who has worked in public service at some point before, whether that's a nonprofit or government? Who wants to be a public service lawyer one day? All right, that is most of the room here. So we're going to talk about a bunch of the different things the Biden administration has done to provide direct assistance to people with student debt. Before I jump into that, I do want to thank Kate and our Attorney General for all of their leadership on these issues. A lot of the things that we're going to talk about today are the byproduct of years of work by state AGs that have been calling foul on the way the student loan system works. I suppose I should ask the other question, the first question. Who has a student loan here? There we go. All right. You shouldn't. Student debt is unjust. Higher education should be free. I should start by saying that. And we're working on it. There's lots of work happening every day from elected officials across the country to try to build a better future for folks so that they don't end up in that situation. I am now still sitting with my student loans. I'll be paying them when my kids go to college. And I think that's going to be true for a lot of folks. So I am going to start by talking about the big thing. President Biden in August got up in front of the podium and announced to the world that he plans to cancel student debt for everybody. $10,000 for most folks, $20,000 for everybody that needed a Pell Grant to go to college. There's some messiness here. And the exercise is right and just and ultimately is going to be successful, but I imagine when we get to the Q&A, folks will have questions. It's a room full of lawyers about what's going on in courts right now. I am not spending time on that in this presentation, but I'm more than happy to get in the weeds. There have been 3 lawsuits filed so far. One was just denied a motion for a preliminary injunction in a TRO yesterday. The hearing on the Republican state AG's case is going to be on Tuesday. We'll find out. But as of right now, no court has enjoined this. This is the law of the land. And it is our expectation that everybody that's eligible is going to get debt relief. And so what that means as a practical matter is as long as you're not a high earner, so 95% of all people with student loans are eligible for this. For folks with law school debt, for a lot of people, it's a drop in the bucket. We are, pushing for more. We're always pushing for more. I think part of the reason why I like to talk about public service loan forgiveness when I'm talking to a room full of lawyers is because that provides complete debt relief. You are debt-free at the end of that journey. It doesn't always work. It's been bumpy along the way. It's getting better. We're going to talk about all of that. But these two programs are not mutually exclusive. Take a little bit off the top and work your way towards debt cancellation. If you're working in public service, there's opportunities for everybody. So again, I should also note this is just getting started here. It is the byproduct of years and years of advocacy by individual borrowers who got cheated by for-profit colleges and said that this was unfair and that these debts were unjust. Civil rights groups, labor unions, the kind of broader coalition pushing for debt cancellation brought us to this point where President Biden has made this enormous pledge. Ultimately, if this is successful, it's going to result in half of all people with student debt being debt-free. It's a drop in the bucket for lawyers, but it's life-changing for the folks that are going to be debt-free. It also will provide relief to parents that borrowed on behalf of undergrad students. There's lots of different ways this is going to help deal with the intergenerational effects of student debt. So, again, I'm happy to talk more about that during the Q&A, but I really do want to get into public service loan forgiveness recognizing that this is not going to be applicable to some of the folks in this room, I'm going to skip around just a little bit, but I should start by saying ForgiveMyStudentDebt.org is a website that we run with American Federation of Teachers, National Education Association, AFSCME, the Teamsters, American Association of University Professors, National Association of Social Workers. I don't think that I'm missing anybody, but a big table of labor and professional organizations have come together to help people connect the dots to get their debts canceled. Right now, that great information at ForgiveMyStudentDebt.org is focused on public service loan forgiveness, but there are also dozens of FAQs about broad debt cancellation, lots of information, and more importantly, instructional videos that walk you through all of the steps of the things I'm going to talk about today. So when I brush through something or I use jargon, don't worry, there's another way to be able to get this same information, but slower and step-by-step with screenshots of how this actually works. So I'm going to get into the guts of it, but I am going to skip around a little bit, recognizing that not everybody here works in public service. So what is public service loan forgiveness? This is, up until Joe Biden decided to cancel student debt for everybody, this was the broadest debt relief program that existed. Anybody that works full-time in public service that has the right kind of loan, is enrolled in the right kind of payment plan, and makes the right number of payments, has a legal right under federal law to get their debt canceled. Only specific kinds of student loans are eligible, and this has caused lots of problems for folks in the past. But if you are a relatively recent borrower, anybody that took out loans after 2010, a lot of the problems that plagued this program in the early days aren't applicable to you. The most common kind of student loan, a direct loan, has been the way most people pay for college and grad school since 2010, since Congress changed some rules. But for older borrowers like me that took out loans before that, most people have loans that you needed to jump through some hoops to get on track. And I'll talk about those hoops, I'll talk about why they've changed, I'll talk about what you can do to get on track here. You also have this set of requirements here. This is how the law is written. This is not how it works today. This is not how it has worked for the past year. It might be how it works starting next month. So I'm going to talk about this limited window. We have about a month left for people to be able to brush away some of these requirements that have knocked people off track and actually get on track and get their debts canceled. You have to enroll in the right type of payment plan. That was true yesterday. That's going to be true tomorrow. Again, there's this limited window where people are getting credit for mistakes that have been made because their student loan company enrolled them in the wrong payment plan or gave them bad advice. I'm going to talk about that in just a second as well. But for most people, most of the time, especially for the students in the room, once you get out of school and you're making these decisions, if you want to work in public interest, enroll in what's called an income-driven repayment plan. Make payments based on your income, not based on how much debt you borrow. You have a right to make those payments. The Biden administration is making them even more protective, cutting people's income-driven payment plans in half. And also picking up the tab for any interest charges that you don't pay when you're making income-driven payments. Those are really big changes. They won't go into effect until January, but just know that for public interest lawyers that are trying to get their debts canceled under public service loan forgiveness, income-driven repayment is the engine that powers the whole thing. You pay less than you otherwise could every month, and then whatever's left over gets canceled at the end. And I'm going to say that a few different times, a few different ways, but that's really the key piece of intuition to make the whole thing work. You also have to work in public service. And so I think for a public interest lawyer, there's a very narrow definition of public service that comes to mind. It's providing direct services for folks, often in legal aid. But the definition of public service work is huge. It's enormous. It's incredibly broad. 1 in 4 U.S. workers work for an employer that qualifies for public service loan forgiveness. That is any federal, state, or local government agency. It's any 501c3 nonprofit. And it's lots of other kinds of nonprofit organizations that are not 501c3s. It's also serving in any branch of the armed forces. So taken together, that's tens of millions of people who work in public interest as defined by law here. And that is roughly 9 million current working public service workers in America. So not quite 1 in 4 people with student debt are people that are eligible for public service loan forgiveness. This also has to be full-time, but it can be multiple part-time jobs stretched across different employers. So for people that are working for, this is less applicable in a room full of lawyers, but for people that are working in healthcare or people that are working in higher education, it's really common to work for multiple hospitals, multiple healthcare systems, multiple colleges. So there are some people that structure their law practices that way too. It's a good thing to flag, but probably less applicable to this group. It also doesn't really matter what your workload is, as long as it's more than 30 hours a week and your employer is willing to call that full-time for the purposes of public service loan forgiveness. It doesn't matter if that qualifies you for other benefits. It doesn't matter if that gets you your 401k match. As long as your employer is willing to sign the form that says you work more than 30 hours a week, and for the purposes of this program, it's full-time, that's good enough to cross the bar. And so that can get you debt cancellation. You have to do this, all of this technical stuff that knocks people off track every month for 120 months. And so it should be no surprise that this gets messed up and that people get knocked off track and that they don't get credit for months where they've done everything right. That's going to bring us to the thrust of most of what we're going to talk about today. But I just want to note here that this is a mess, and particularly folks who have tried to navigate this and failed over the course of the past 14 years. Things are getting better. People are getting their debts canceled every day. I'm going to talk about this Biden administration initiative to make this actually work for folks, but I like to pause at this point in the presentation and just say one more time, like, messing this up is the government's fault, and it is your student loan company's fault. It is not your fault. Nobody would design this and think that, and I say this having worked on the law that created it, like, nobody would design this way unless they were trying to knock people off track. The Bush administration and the Obama administration both wrote rules to implement this program in a way that narrowed the funnel of people that would likely be able to get access to debt cancellation, because they wanted to make the program cheaper and they wanted to increase administrative burden on folks as a way to be able to narrow the scope of the program. So you have this very lofty set of ideals, a quarter of the US workforce able to get their debt canceled, and then you have this outcome, and this is just a series of legal and policy choices and industry practices stacked one on top of another for 14 years that resulted in, kind of famously, 99% of people who applied for debt cancellation having their applications rejected in the first year this became available. When President Biden took office, less than 10,000 people had ever received public service loan forgiveness, despite the fact that a quarter of the US workforce work in jobs that are eligible. So we have seen, I'm going to talk about the successes of the past year or two, but we have seen more than 20 times the amount of debt relief under this program in the past 11 months than we did in the prior 14 years. We got there in part because people experienced this. And I know that there's some folks in the room that have been doing some nodding here. Like, people experienced this. They tried to get their debts canceled. They did everything they thought they were supposed to do. They did everything they were told to do. And then they got told to take a walk when it became time to ask for debt relief. And at the beginning of the Biden administration, in response to pressure from individual borrowers and from advocates across this kind of broad coalition of folks that are fighting for people with student debt, the administration asked what should be done about it. And tens of thousands of people shared really gut-wrenching stories about working in public service through COVID, trying to be able to keep this promise to have their debts canceled and being told to take a walk. And we helped tell this story. We helped educate policymakers and state officials from across the country, attorneys general, banking regulators, governors, members of Congress, local electeds, got student loan borrowers' backs and pushed really, really hard on the Biden administration to be able to fix this mess. So what did that give us? That gave us what the government has named the limited PSLF waiver, which, if you want to put somebody to sleep, is a great thing to call it. What it is in practice is keeping this original promise of public service loan forgiveness, saying if you work in public service for 10 years, we're going to cancel your debts. We're not going to get stuck on red tape or tricks and traps along the way. We're just going to actually do the thing that the law says we're supposed to do. Unfortunately, the way that they went about this was to use these emergency powers. And I'm going to step back into lawyer CLE mode and talk about the law just for a second because I have you here. But Congress, after 9/11, passes this law that says if somebody serving in the military, where there's like an emergency that results in a mobilization, needs some flexibility with the student loan program, the education secretary can basically just waive statute, waive regulations, do whatever they need to do to help military-affected borrowers navigate the mess that is our student loan program. And in 2003, Congress looks at this a second time and goes way bigger and says any national emergency, so that includes public health, that includes natural disasters, it also includes military affected people, gives the Education Secretary a chance to waive the Higher Education Act and make programs work better for folks. And so the pandemic happens, President Biden comes in and has this enormous emergency power under this piece of law from 2003 that hadn't been used very much, except it had been used to pause everybody's student loan payments. And so no one is making payments. The student loan system's been flipped on its head. And tens of thousands of public service workers are banging at the door saying, make this right for us. And so the administration takes this dusty old law that had never been used in this way before, but gave the Education Secretary the power to do it, and just brushes away the requirements related to what kind of loan you need to have for public service loan forgiveness, what kind of payment plan you need to be enrolled in, and also some other stuff that I'm going to talk about. But the net effect of that is basically everyone who works in public service and wants to get their debt canceled can raise their hand and get their debt canceled now, as long as they've been working for 10 years. And everyone who hasn't been working for 10 years can take advantage of this and get lots and lots of credit towards public service loan forgiveness so they can finish out their public interest career and get their debt canceled later. So for the folks that are not working in public service now, you should do this, the stuff that I'm going to walk through now. You should get your credit for the public service work you've previously done. And if you end up back in public service, you'll be able to finish out your decade and get your debt canceled. Hopefully the effect of this is going to be to draw people back into public service work. The intent of the law in its earliest days was to help build a more resilient public service workforce, to help us as lawyers with lots of debt serve in our communities. And so hopefully this is something of a restoration of those first principles too. So what happened here? What's different? The administration said that if you have these older student loans that were not direct loans, that were not eligible for public service loan forgiveness, you could now do what's called consolidating, and I'll talk about that process in just a sec, to get on track for public service loan forgiveness and to give you credit for all the time you've spent working before you take these steps. The law normally just resets the clock for you. If you raise your hand and take your old loan, turn it into a new loan, you're starting from zero from the minute you do that. But because of this waiver, because of this limited action, you have the ability to get credit for all your public service work that came before it. The administration has also said that it's not going to look at what payment plan you're in. So lots and lots of people got told to enroll in an extended payment plan and make lower monthly payments, but not enroll in income-driven repayment. That is lots of folks that were trying to sort this out really early in the program's life especially. They were given wrong information, and in recognition of this, the administration did something kind of cool. They didn't make people prove that they were lied to. I think that those of us that are consumer lawyers here, we have that frame a lot. What is the evidence of the allegation, and how do you narrowly tailor the remedy to make sure that it meets people where they are? When you're talking about public policy, you get to have a lot more fun. No offense to the consumer lawyers that are here. Here, the administration really tried to make this as simple as it can be and make sure that anybody that wants to get their debt canceled can raise their hand and do it without having to bring a whole phone book full of evidence with them. They can just now apply, and whatever payment plan they were enrolled in before will get credit towards public service loan forgiveness. That doesn't matter if you made your payments on time. It doesn't matter whether you made your payments in full. All that matters is that you were making payments on some payment plan over some period of time, and that period of time will get you credit towards public service loan forgiveness. Most importantly, actually, sorry, I glossed over one other thing. This is not completely automatic. So for folks that want to get on track, I'll talk about how in just a sec. But you do need to act here, and you need to act by October 31st, 2022. That is the end of this month. We are fighting hard to be able to extend this waiver deadline. The Oregon Attorney General, along with AGs from across the country, is pushing the White House, along with advocates and civil rights groups and labor unions and members of Congress, to not get rid of a good thing. This is working for folks. So more than 2 million people have gotten extra credit towards public service loan forgiveness because of this waiver. More than 150,000 have had their debts canceled completely. That is between 10 and 20 times more debt relief under PSLF in just the past 11 months of the 14 years prior. So it's working. We've actually managed to make this clunky program work for public service workers. And so we shouldn't end it. But as of right now, the rules say you have to take some action to get on track. And I'll talk about those specific actions now. And you have to do them in the next 4 weeks, at least one of them. So what does it mean to get on track? To figure out if you're eligible here, you have to figure out if you have a qualified public service employer. We talked about those categories already, but I'll show you what that means specifically. You have to figure out whether you have a loan that already counts, or you have to take these extra steps to make your loans count. And then you have to tell the government you work in public service. You do have to raise your hand and certify your service, and I'll talk about what that means in a minute. I'm going to jump through 1 and 2 very quickly, because I know we have a mixed audience here. Not everybody's a public service worker, and some folks are just aspiring public service workers. But we should, for folks that have questions about figuring out if you have a qualified employer, we have really great detailed information on forgivemystudentdebt.org. The way you actually do this is by going to the Education Department's website. That's studentaid.gov. It's the same place you applied for financial aid when you took out student loans in the first place. It may be a place where you've gone to enroll in a different payment plan back before the pandemic. But you have to take some actions here if you want to be eligible. And the first step to figuring out if you are eligible is to figure out if your employer qualifies. So again, I'm not going to walk through the guts of this today, but just know that studentaid.gov is the way that you do that. You also need to make sure that you have student loans that qualify. You do that at studentaid.gov too. I am going to spend just a minute on that in a second when we get to the slides. And I do want to spend a little while talking about how you certify your service, because that's the place where most people get tripped up. And that's applicable to anybody that wants to benefit from the waiver, whether you're getting credit for an old job, or you're getting credit for the job you're in right now, or whether you've worked for 10 years and you're ready to have your debt canceled. So confirming employers, you do this at studentaid.gov, and something that's different. I know that there are folks here that worked in public service a while ago and got knocked off track. There used to be no way to confirm that your employer works for this program, that you actually meet the eligibility criteria. About a year and a half ago, the administration created this thing, the Trump administration created this thing called the Public Service Loan Forgiveness Help Tool. And this includes this database of every public service employer where any worker has ever certified that they're eligible for PSLF. And so you can actually go use your employer's EIN, which is on your pay stub, it's on your W-2, and match your employer with any other workers that have already certified. And so the government will kind of pre-approve that you have an eligible employer. There's lots of small government agencies and small nonprofits that aren't in this database, but every single person that certifies their service makes it a better database and makes it easier for everybody else. So I just want to give a plug for it. It's a good example of government using tech to make people's lives easier. It actually works quite well. So I won't go into the mechanics of how this works. Just know that studentaid.gov, and then if you want more instruction and background, check out forgivemystudentdebt.org, where we have lots and lots of additional information. Again, with identifying your student loans, I also am not going to dive deep into the weeds of this, but for folks that have older loans from before 2010 that went to Sallie Mae to get their loans or went to a bank, you have to take some steps here, and you can figure out whether you have one of those kinds of loans by going to studentaid.gov. Again, the Education Department has a separate database where you get to look up your loans, find your student aid information, and figure out if you have to take these extra steps. If you have one of these older loans, and there are lots and lots of people that do, you have to do what's called consolidating your loans. And some folks may have done this already, others may still need to, but this is one of the ways that you can take some action to get on track for public service loan forgiveness. What you're doing here is you're paying off these old loans that don't count with a new federal student loan that does count. So you go to studentaid.gov and you can actually see an application. It takes between 20 and 30 minutes to fill out. You don't need to bunch multiple loans together to do this. If you have loans that don't qualify, keep them separate and just put them in a new consolidation and create a new loan. Don't wrap your old direct loans into it. We have more kind of step-by-step instructions. That is a very complicated technical point. I want to flag that I'm happy to talk more about that in FAQs if folks have questions, but we have information on forgivemystudentdebt.org about how that actually works in practice. The word consolidation is a bit of a misnomer. You don't actually need to have multiple loans together. All you're really doing is swapping an old loan for a new loan that qualifies. It takes about 20 or 30 minutes. You'll see your student loan information already in there. You'll be able to pick your new student loan company. This company Mohela, Mohela, is the company that handles all the loans for folks that are trying to get on track for public service loan forgiveness. That's the place you should go because they'll give you updated counts of how many payments qualify. I do want to talk about this company just for a second at the end here, but there is a path here that can make you set up for success in the future, even if you're not going to get your debt canceled under the waiver this month or this year. The last thing I would flag, you have to certify some stuff to be able to finish this application, along with picking a repayment plan. So again, setting yourself up for success down the line. If you're going to try to pursue PSLF and you just want to get some months of payments here, pick income-driven repayment. No one's going to make you pay a bill until the pause on student loan payments ends. Millions of people have filled out these forms since March of 2020. Many of them have picked payment plans. None of them are making payments right now. Consolidating your loans also makes you eligible for the pause on student loan payments. People have not had to make payments going back to March of 2020. They haven't had interest charged on their loans if they have these kinds of loans. Those months, what's now closing in on 3 years, all count towards public service loan forgiveness. So everything else I've said about needing a payment plan and needing to make payments, that doesn't count right now during this pause because of the pandemic. So basically, the waiver plus consolidation gives everybody almost 3 years of credit towards public service loan forgiveness just for filling out a piece of paper. So you have to finish out 7 more years worth of public service work, not starting from the day you start to make payments again. So for early career lawyers or for people that are thinking about a career switch, you're not looking at a decade of service anymore. As long as you've been working in public service, even if you didn't even know about the program, this period of time counts as long as you can certify your service to show you've worked in public service during the pandemic. So I'm going to talk about what certifying your service means, and this is the end of what has been kind of a long and technical presentation. So I am very happy to reorient the conversation back to the folks in the room that are not public service workers. I'm happy to answer questions about the mechanics of this, but I do want to end here by talking about how you actually raise your hand and tell the government you work in public service. So to do that, you're back at the same website, studentaid.gov. This is the central hub for the education department for everything that has to do with student loans. Again, forgivemystudentdebt.org has a version of this presentation that's broken down into short videos that walk through each of these things. So don't worry if you're missing a website or if you're missing some jargon here, there's a way to slow down and do it again. But once you're at studentaid.gov, you're back in the same database confirming your employer, but this time you actually pick your employer if you found it, and this tool will fill out an employer certification form or a PSLF form for you. That form has to be printed out and signed by your employer. And that is an extremely frustrating process, particularly for folks that work for big employers. We've heard that the University of California system, for example, has a backlog of many thousands of these employer certification forms because of the waiver and because of the time crunch. So the Biden administration has said that to get in line, to get all of these benefits that we've talked about today, you don't actually have to submit the form anymore. All you have to do is go to studentaid.gov and generate the form. You will have logged in already. The government will know you have generated the form. Return it when your employer can return it. There's no timeline on this. You should do it as quickly as you can, but there's no timeline on it. So when I talk about taking a step to be able to get in line here, this is the step that everyone should take. It's going to be hard for folks that used to work in public service to track down the HR person at their old employer and get them to certify. We know that's a pain. So to be able to get in line, even if this thing doesn't get extended, we hope it does, but even if it doesn't, all you need to do is go to this tool and generate this form. The government will know you generated this form. That gets this set of new rights, this waiver, vested on your student loan until you've finished your paperwork and it's been processed. So we hear anecdotally that once you fill out the form and you submit it, and I should note, you have to submit it by fax or by US mail, unless you are already somebody that's done this in the past and you're already on track and your student loan company is Mohela. So basically, everyone with an older student loan, everyone that's never really engaged with the system before, is going to have to fax it or submit it by US mail. Keep documents. Government sucks. This is a perfect example of why this stuff makes people crazy. But just know that you have the ability here to just tell the government you're trying. And that's what you're doing by printing out this form. And as long as you've done that, you've locked in the rails here that you can ride to getting your debts canceled, and you can deal with the process and whatever comes next. So There are some other tricks and traps on this form that I'm going to run through here, but just note that the act of creating the form, I know I've said this 3 times, I'm going to say it a 4th. The act of creating this form is the most important thing you can do in the next 4 weeks. And as long as you do that before Halloween, you're going to be able to get credit. You're going to be on track to be able to have this work for you. So what does it mean to actually have your form submitted? So there are some people here who are going to try to go to that form and match their employer, and their employer is not going to be there. The government's going to tell you that it's going to take 3 or 4 weeks. It's probably 3 or 4 months for them to actually look up your employer and tell you that you're on track and let you fill out this form electronically. So for those people, you are raising your hand just by submitting your employer. So that's one of the other ways that you can show you want to get on track. That process is going to be annoying. It's going to take a while for somebody to get back to you. We're recommending folks do both things at once. So submit that employer, get that processed, but also you can go to a website that, again, Forgive My Student Debt has all the links here, and print out a physical copy of a form and fill it out yourself and have your employer sign it. That's really belt and suspenders. Like, you are doing the thing you have to do here just by requesting the government evaluate your employer. But it's better to have your paperwork in if you have the ability to do it. Not everybody does. I think for those of us that work with low-income clients, it's often the paperwork causes paralysis. And so if they have someone that's there to help them with the paperwork, do the paperwork. You have this moment where you're helping somebody navigate this process. Like when we're working with folks that are particularly healthcare workers, but like folks that are busy and that aren't around to like sit on the phone and ask questions during the business day, and you have that person's attention, help them fill out their paperwork, do the paperwork too, and don't just trust the system. But what the administration is telling you is just getting in line is good enough, all the different ways you can get in line. We should also just quickly talk about what happens next. So you submit that form. This company, Mohila, is going to become your student loan company. And from there, they're going to give you a count of how many payments you have on track for public service loan forgiveness. If you hit 120, you get your debt canceled. There's all kinds of problems with the way that payments are counted. Lots of people get bad information. I'm going to talk about that in a sec too. Just trust the process. And eventually people's debts are getting canceled. You might get a bad payment count along the way. You might get information that seems wrong. That's all, unfortunately, normal. It happens all the time. It's really bumpy. But they built in, to the credit of the folks, the federal employees that are running this revised program here, not just the White House, but the education department staff that actually made this thing work. People are getting their debts canceled every day. This is actually working for folks in the end. And again, billions of dollars of debt has been canceled for hundreds of thousands of public service workers, and millions of people have gotten credit. So I do want to flag a couple really quick common issues here, and then we can do Q&A however you guys want to do it. First, when you have your employer fill out these forms, don't do lawyer corrections. The government's scanners don't know how to deal with this, and it's going to break it and make you start over. So this is good if you're helping clients too on basically anything that touches the education department. This is like a great rule of thumb for folks that do direct services for people with student debt. The like wet ink signature and adjustment makes government systems freak out. You are better off just printing out a clean form and redoing it, because this is going to get rejected. So just beware when you're dealing with HR, especially. You might get something back that looks muddy. Muddy is bad. Muddy is going to cause months of delays for you. So you just need to you need to work clean. You need to send stuff in that has the right information, the right time, with the right signatures. You also might see information that is wrong, that contradicts what we've talked about today, that looks different than what's on the government's website. Student loan companies are using old template forms to communicate with people about this new program. And so it has wrong information on it. People are told every single day that if they consolidate their loans, for example, they're starting from zero, and they won't get credit for all that old public service work. There are government websites, there are industry websites, there are financial education websites, and there are billing statements with boilerplate on them that go out to millions of people every month that have bad information on them. Just know that what I told you is right. We help people get their debts canceled every single day. The information on forgivemystudentdebt.org is right. And the public service loan forgiveness help tool is mostly right. There's one place where it's wrong. And that place is when you are trying to generate that form. It is not going to let you tell it that you've made 120 qualifying payments if you've done them on an old loan that's still being consolidated. So you might have to lie to it and click no when you know you need to click yes just to be able to generate the form. This is not a thing you're certifying to the government. There's a signature attached to this. This piece of the help tool is just a thing you kind of have to click through. But it trips people up, particularly people that have been working in public service for a long period of time. So I just want to flag that otherwise the information here is pretty good. The education department team did a great job building a thing from scratch in basically no time in government years. And it has a couple bugs, and this is a big one. So you just need to make sure you're clicking buttons that let you advance so you can get to printing out the form, because generating the form is the way you raise your hand. Don't let this knock you off track. The last thing I would say is, and I mentioned this before, is the payment counts. Student loan companies are giving people bad payment counts. Even when you've done everything we've talked about, you might get a thing in the mail or a thing in your online statement that says you have one payment instead of 120. Just be patient. This stuff's getting worked out, but people are getting wrong payment counts every day. And so, again, it takes a lot of work to convince somebody that's been told no over and over and over again for 10 years that this time the no is okay and that it's actually going to work out for them. But I promise you it is. It is canceling people's debts every day, and we need to just keep doing what we're doing. So with that, I'm happy to answer some questions. October 31st is the big deadline. Please raise your hand, get yourself in line before October 31st. Do the things we talked about. That's kind of all it is.
Excellent. Thank you, Mike and Kate. If you have questions, please feel free to step over to the microphone so that we can capture your question for our viewers who will watch this recording later. All right, awesome.
So I have a question in relation to the 30-hour requirement.
Yeah.
I'm completely full-time private practice, but I do some prosecutor stuff on the side. And so the main prosecutor, her concern is the 30-hour requirement. Some, when we're in trials and stuff, obviously will be there 60 hours, right? What recommendations or thought do you have on that 30-hour audit? She's like, hey, you're not here in an office 30 hours a week. And I know that, but I'm working, getting witnesses ready, subpoenas, all those different things collectively. So what are your thoughts and takeaways on having her sign off on that?
I would do it. I mean, I have because the law lets you patch together multiple jobs to get to public service. It doesn't matter whether you have another job that you work more hours at, as long as
that other job is completely personal injury private.
It shouldn't matter as long as you're hitting 30 hours. The important part, though, is your for your prosecutorial work.
Yeah.
Who is paying you? Are you being
the county? Yeah.
Yeah. So are you a 1099 or a W-2 for the county?
W-2.
If you're a W-2 employee for the county and you're working more than 30 hours a week on average, they should be able to certify that. It doesn't. You don't have to work 30 hours every single week.
And that's what she's worried about is
Yeah.
because there's weekend on calls and all that.
Yeah,
other stuff.
no, I don't. If your employer is willing to say, I mean, you need to convince them. But if your employer is willing to say
Right.
you are a 30-hour-a-week employee, which means full time for the purpose of public service loan forgiveness and nothing else,
Yeah.
and you're a W-2 employee, this should work fine.
Okay.
And another example of where this happens every day are teachers. There are lots of school districts where full time is 8 months a year of work. And you're allowed to certify 8 months a year of full-time work as a year's teaching, and that gets you 12 months of credit towards public service loan forgiveness. So folks do this regularly in teaching. It seems like it should work just fine there.
Okay, perfect. Thanks.
Hi, my name is Kimberly Eason. I really appreciate this panel. I think I know the answer to this question, but I'm just hoping and praying that somebody can help me. So I graduated from law school in 2019. And at the time, everyone was saying, refinance your loans, you're going to get a better interest rate. And it was true for me. For my last set of loans, I was at like maybe 7%. So of course, in the fall of 2017, I refinance. I'm down to 3.3% interest rate on my loans. Of course, and then March 2020 hits, and everybody else is getting all of this debt relief, and I'm not. So I guess my question now is there anything that I can do, or is there any hope for anybody with refinanced student loans, or do I just have to keep, chugging along and making these payments?
Well, I'll start by saying I'm in the same boat as you. I refinanced my student loans in 2017. Lots of us did. And unfortunately, there's not really anything that folks who refinanced before the pandemic can do about it other than repay their student loans. There have been bills passed by different chambers of Congress to cancel debt for private student loan borrowers. The House passed one offering $10,000 worth of debt cancellation, which is a drop in the bucket for lots of folks that have law school debt. The chances of that making it through both chambers of Congress and getting signed by the president aren't great. But just know that there are, Maxine Waters in particular, but there are members of Congress that are fighting really hard to try to make sure that the folks that are left out of the executive action do get taken care of. But you're trusting Congress to legislate, which is like a thing that doesn't happen in 2022. So the other thing I would note, though, unfortunately for folks like us, but anybody that did refinance during the pandemic actually can unwind those refinances. So the government has this policy of giving refunds to any payments made since March of 2020. So mechanically the way this works is you still have that refinanced student loan, but the government will give you the check that SoFi or Common Bond sent them. They'll pay it directly back to you, and you can use that money to pay off your refinanced student loan. Unfortunately, it doesn't work for anybody before the pandemic. So we're all stuck. But for anybody that did refinance in the early days of the pandemic, and lots of people did, you can unwind that. You can actually get the payoff payment that came from your refinance company back from the government, as long as it happened after, basically starting April 1st, 2020.
Hey everybody, thank you for a great panel. I actually have a quick comment / promotional ad to give here. And so many of you probably already know this, but some of you may not. If you go to ambar.org/debt, that is the ABA-YLD's collection of resources on student debt loans, or student loan debt. And to me, a really big important thing, many of you may feel like, oh, I made some kind of mistake in my educational loan journey. Student loan debt is the #1 issue for young lawyers. We know that from doing a lot of surveys at the ABA. And so I just kind of want to drive home how important it is to maintain your ABA membership, to encourage your other fellow young lawyers to be ABA members, because the advocacy work that the YLD and the ABA does on this issue is super important. And so, you kind of maybe briefly touched on it at the beginning. Unfortunately, this is kind of becoming, to me surprisingly, a political issue when we talk about student debt nationwide. And I just want to share something very quickly. There's been a number of videos here where we compare the cost of law school tuition to two factors. One is home prices, and the other is starting salaries at Big Law over the last 35 years. Check out those two graphics on the ABA YLD's website. I shared that with my state bar board of governors, and some of the comments I got back on those graphics were, these are quotes verbatim: absolutely stunning, truly insane, troubling to watch. And so I do think that a big portion of this for me, especially when it comes to lawyers getting debt relief, you've probably heard the sound clips, why should a welder in Ohio pay for a lawyer in LA who's making 6 figures a year? That's not the case, and I think a big component of this is education, and all of you have an opportunity to be an advocate in this space. So thank you.
And welders have debt too.
All right. Any other questions for our panelists? If not, I have a question. At the beginning, you mentioned the Biden administration student loan debt cancellation. So can you talk a little bit about who exactly qualifies for that, and what are the consequences of that cancellation? Namely, is that forgiveness taxable income?
Yeah, I can do that. And I'll pull this back up here for folks. So, who qualifies for this, and under what circumstances is it taxable income? This is, again, it's anybody who is earning under $125,000 for individuals or $250,000 for a household. That's measured based on your adjusted gross income from either 2020 or 2021. Because this is the same legal tool that the president used to fix public service loan forgiveness. It's this pandemic era emergency authority. And so you document your income from during the emergency. That's why it's 2020 or 2021 income. it's your adjusted gross income, and so that means that there are folks that gross income is above the threshold, but they have retirement savings and other things that are above the line deductions, and they end up with an AGI that puts them under. So this is 95+% of all people with student debt. The extra debt cancellation for Pell recipients, this depends on whether you got a Pell grant. So 65% of all people with student loans used a Pell Grant to pay for college. If you're a parent and you used a Pell Grant when you went to college, but you have loans that you took out on behalf of your student, undergrad, you actually get this additional debt cancellation too. So there are households where mom or dad will get $20,000 worth of debt cancellation, and their child that went to college will also get $20,000 worth of debt cancellation. We've talked to lots of folks that have, thinking about that as like we're all lawyers here, thinking about that as a policy failure. Why, if I needed a Pell Grant to go to college, does my kid also need a Pell Grant to go to college? Something didn't work in America. And so there's a real recognition of that here in the way that this has been distributed. The tax thing is slightly complicated depending on what state you're in, but at the federal level, this debt cancellation is tax-free. Thanks to Senator Warren and Senator Menendez in the American Rescue Plan at the beginning of the Biden administration, any kind of student debt cancellation, whether that is state-level policy around debts owed directly to colleges, like what got signed by Governor Newsom in California last night, or debt cancellation that comes from the White House. That is tax-free under federal law. It is not income. But there are a few states, most states just have their tax code follow the feds. And so for most people in most of the country, nothing needs to change at the state level to make that also tax-free. There are a few states where that's not the case. California, but everybody expects that they're going to change the law probably early in the year next year when the legislature comes back in. Governor Newsom has said that this is a priority for his administration, along with the leadership of the Assembly. Unfortunately, Indiana wants to tax your debt, and I think there is a real counter reaction that's happening in certain Republican states to keep their regressive tax laws in place. State taxes are relatively low. There's lots of ways to kind of work around state tax liability, but just know that as this becomes increasingly partisan, we're going to see some weird stuff on the very small handful of states that do have potential tax liability for folks. But at the federal level, there is no tax liability.
Hello, everyone. My name is Lynette Richardson. I serve as chair of the Law Student Division. So we're not all lawyers here. Some of us are law students and we're sitting in the back, but we represent our constituents, and our constituents are primarily concerned with student loan debt, just like everyone else here. So that is going to be one of our focus areas of this term, is programming centered around student loan debt. So I appreciate your presentation. It was very informative. I do want to encourage everyone to remember, maybe the education starts in law school. So if we can do some partnerships when it comes to programming and this education, I learned a lot. So maybe we can do something during this term where we can educate on a grander scale. And that's all I wanted to say. I just wanted to say we're here. Maybe if we kind of learn how to navigate this system then we wouldn't have to wait till we're young lawyers, and then it's a different dichotomy. Thank you.
I think that's awesome. We would love to work with you. Just if you don't mind following up with me after, I'm happy to. All right. I should note that the longer version of this presentation is happening a couple times a week between now and the end of October. You can go stream it if you need more information or share it with your friends. ForgiveMyStudentDebt.org. There's lots and lots there. But we are having live versions with live Q&A happening. Some days it's multiple times a day, but a whole bunch of them between now and the end of October.
So I really just want to say that we have rock star speakers here today. And you guys, they're kind of humble, but Mike Pierce is probably the most knowledgeable person on this topic in the country at this time. And we are so lucky to have you here, not only at this event, but living in Oregon. So, he testified on our bills. Every bill we've had that has succeeded has been in large part because of his participation. And I stole Kate Campbell away from the FTC so that she could come back and be a part of DOJ, and I'm so delighted that you're doing this work. So I just wanted to say that the ABA, and I just want to kind of sort of echo the comments that already were made, but the ABA is now on the map, needs to be continuing to make this a top priority, not just the law student division, not just the young lawyer division, but every single section and division of the ABA. There's really hardly anything that is more important. I call it the obligation of a lifetime, and I put a question mark after that because I'm absolutely committed to it not being the obligation of a lifetime. So I just want to thank you guys and all of you for this. There's really hardly anything more important. So thanks for waking up early. That's very cool. I mean, young lawyers, law students, getting into an
Thank
8
you.
o'clock program. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Let's give a round of applause for our panelists. They will be available for additional questions.